probably about 5th grade. And in 5th grade, I was having trouble sleeping. I was trying to sleep, but the problem was it felt like there was like a toothpick or a rock in my eye. And so I checked my eye and tried to see if there was something floating around in there, and there wouldn't be anything there. This happened for like 3 days. I was just not sleeping. I was waking up, my eyes were all bloodshot. Just in one eye. Just one eye was all bloodshot. And it was painful. It felt all scratchy, like something was in there scratching me, like there was a pebble in there or something, right? And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my eye, and finally it's bothering me. My mom asked, why aren't you sleeping good? Because I'm complaining. Why's your eye hurt? I said, I don't know. It feels like something's in there, Mom, like something's in there. Can you see anything? She looks in my eye, pulls it open and looks in there. There's nothing in my eye. She can't see anything. But then she notices there's a little tiny bump just on the interior of that eyelid. Little tiny bump. And she's looking at it and everything. So we set up an eye doctor appointment. So we go to the eye doctor. And he checks it out and he looks. And I tell him what's going on, and he looks at it and he goes, oh, well, you've got see that little bump on the inside of that eyelid right there? He says, you just got like a little growth or a little like clogged gland or something. I don't know what he called it. But he says, here's what I want you to do. Just get a needle. Just get a needle. And, just gonna like pop it. It's like it looks like a little bubble. Just gonna let it pop it. And I'm 5th grade, and what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, what kind of doctor is this? Have you heard the saying, doctor? Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. And the doctor is telling me to stick a needle in my eye. That's crazy. I said, I don't know if I can do that. He goes, I'll show you how. Well, he shows me how to do it. And just until about 2 years ago, all my life, I've been sticking a needle in my eye when I get that little bump, and it comes up every now and then. I pull that eyelid out. Now, right now, if I was telling the story, my brother was here. He'd be like running out of the room because he has this thing about eyeballs. He'd be running out of the room. His eyes would be watering right now, because even as I tell the story, he would just be sitting there. His eyes would be squinting and watering. But all my life, I've just been, going in front of the mirror and just looking away, get that, needle and popping that little bump. Eye doctor 2 years ago, I said, hey, I got a question for you, man. When I was 5th grade, I had a little bump, I told him the whole story, and he looked at me horrified. Horrified. Just like, oh my gosh, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. I was like, what should I do? Because, I get that little bump every few months. It comes up on that little eyelid right there. He's like, get a hot washcloth. Like, get a compress and just put it on there. And, in the day, just do that a couple times. And that little bump it's just a little clogged little duct, a little clogged tear duct, or a little pore that's clogged up. He says, and it'll go away on its own. Like, wow. But now I'm so used to doing that thing with the needle, and it works. It works. All I'm saying is it works. I know it's not like, cross my heart, hope to die. Take a needle in my eye. Crazy. We'll look at a story today in Scripture in John chapter 9. If you want to join there with me. John chapter 9. We'll see another crazy remedy. I'll read it for you. We'll read all the way. Oh, it's a long one. We're running short. So, I don't know. We may have to do a two-parter on this message. But we'll see how far we get. John chapter 9. Starting in verse 1. As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. A man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming, when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. The word means sent. So the man went and washed, and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they asked. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" They were divided. Then they turned again to the man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." A second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God by telling the truth," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see." They asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why? Do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opens my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You are steeped in sin at birth, or you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man replied. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." That is a long passage. A wonderful story. Let's dive in. We'll go back to verse 1. I'll work through it. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. Recognize this guy's blind from birth. We've seen Jesus encounter people. And in fact, at the pool we talked about the other week, a man at the pool of Bethesda, the man at the 5 pools, or the 5 colonnades. Sorry, I get it all mixed up. He was there, he had an infirmity, and Jesus heals the guy, and later comes to the guy and says, "Now don't go back to sin, or you'll be worse off than before." Right? Indicating that at one time that guy was healthy, and then somehow he became disabled because of sin. Because of his activities, somehow it led to him being disabled. And Jesus heals him. But then later tells him, "Hey, don't go back to your life of sin. Live differently." So we see that guy, was healed. But here's a case where a man's born blind. He's blind from birth. Right? And so Jesus sees the guy. And Jesus' disciples ask him, "Who sinned, this man or his parents? Whose fault is it that this guy's blind? Is it something this guy did when he was a baby in his mama's womb? Or did his parents do something and now God is punishing him and his parents for the parents' sin?" And it seems like a strange question to us. We just kind of look at it and go, "That's crazy. Why would they think that this guy sinned when he was a little baby? What did he do? Was he in his mama's stomach and he grabbed the food line and stole food from his mom? Or what did he do? What did he do in his mom's stomach? Was he in there worshiping idols? I mean, what could he have possibly done?" We just kind of read that and we're like, how could he have sinned before he was, born? And so God punishes him and he makes him born blind. That seems crazy, like a really weird question. Did the parents sin? We think God, we kind of look at that and we go, no, God doesn't punish you for your relative's sin. We kind of look at that now and go, that's crazy, And as a Christian, we say, no, you have an individual relationship with God, and eventually one day you're not going to stand there behind your parent. You're going to stand there as an individual, stand before God. You're going to account to God. And so the fact that he's punished for sin because of something his parents did, that seems crazy to us. Think of this, though, that the Jews understood that the sins of the parents could affect the children. And that a curse, kind of a sin or a curse, could be passed on in a way that it could affect generations. It could affect the next generation. Think about alcoholism or things like this. It can be, a dysfunction or brokenness that can impact a family. And then it is interesting how many kids who grow up in an alcoholic family end up becoming alcoholics. The very thing they hated when they were a kid, they end up repeating that cycle. Think about that. Can a parent's sin affect a child? We have crack babies. Kids who are born while parents are under the influence, who then are born and affected because of the sin of the parents. So, if you think about it, in a way, that's not so strange that the kid might be blind or deformed or something because of the activity of the parents. So now we look deeper and think about it. Wait, that's not that crazy of a question. So they asked Jesus these questions. Did this guy, is he blind because he sinned before he was born, or is it something his parents did and God's punishing him? I think the first thing we have to understand is they're kind of putting it on God. That God is a bad God, or a God who punishes. They have this view that God is maybe a punishing God. He's a God who wants to he's going to severely punish those who sin against him. God is a fair judge. But they have this understanding that this guy is blind and this thing has happened because God is angry. Jesus answers them and he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. You got it wrong. Your understanding of God is skewed. You're not quite understanding God. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. He's saying, look, in this case, this guy is born blind. God had a plan. This guy was born blind so that God could display a mighty work. That God could show his goodness. A good work could be displayed through this guy's blindness. Through his handicap or his condition, being born that way. God was going to do something in this man. There was going to be a testimony about God's goodness to people all around. And so Jesus says, you don't understand. This didn't happen so everyone could look at that guy and go, yeah, God's punishing him, and God's an angry God, and God hates people. And Jesus says, you got your understanding about God all wrong. God's going to do something great. Jesus goes on and says, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Jesus uses this phrase about day and night. And what that means is that we have time. We have a limited amount of time. He's talking about night being physical death and day being physical life. These are common images in his day for life and death, day and night. And he says, while it's day, while I'm here physically, and while you're here physically, you have an opportunity to do some things. Someday night will come and you will be out of time. You will not have the opportunity. So you got to make the most, you got to take advantage of the time you've been given here. Make it count for something. Jesus is saying, we got to do the works. We got to do the works of God, the works of him who sent me. I'm the light of the world. I want to display God's good works. Jesus says, I'm the light. I'm going to illuminate. I'm going to shine the spotlight on God and let the world see God's a good God. So Jesus is trying to help them understand. This guy has no light. He's blind. But I'm here and I'm the light. And I can change things. After this, he spit on the ground and made some mud with saliva and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, and wash in the pool. The man went and washed and came home seeing. It's the craziest thing. Can you imagine going to the doctor and the doctor hearing about what's going on? You're having chest pains or whatever. Can you imagine the doctor in front of you just going over to a bowl of dirt or a plant in the corner and spitting in the plant and making, and making some mud and putting that on your face and saying, all right, if you'll just go across town to the swimming pool over there at the Star Center, and you'll just go over there and you just wash your face in there and everything will be good. Can you imagine if you went to the doctor and the doctor treated your ailment that way, whatever your ailment was, just spit, make some mud, put it on your face? Isn't that crazy? It's like sticking a needle in your eye, right? That's crazy. And so, but Jesus does things that we don't often understand. He works in ways that are mysterious. I don't know why he chose to heal the guy this way. It's funny, it cracks me up. But he did. He makes mud with some spit and he puts it on this guy. I imagine the guy sitting there, he's blind, he can't see what's going on. Jesus spits, he hears him hockaloogie and spit. And then there's this cold substance being smeared on his face. Strange. Jesus tells him, go and wash. The guy goes. He listens to what Jesus said. He could have just yelled and screamed, wiped off whatever Jesus put on him, and had someone get him a towel, or used his shirt or whatever, and clean that off, and said, that guy's crazy. You know what he did? It didn't make sense, but he listened to Jesus. He didn't completely understand what was happening, but he listened to Jesus. The man went and he washed and he came home seeing. He came home seeing. His sight was restored. He comes home. Can you imagine? When he left that day from the house to go to work, and his work was to go and to sit somewhere and to beg for some money so he could actually live. That was his full-time job. And when he left the house that morning, he didn't plan on getting his sight back. But Jesus entered into his world unexpectedly and did something unexpected. And he came back home a different man. He came home seeing, changed. His transformation was so dramatic, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging said, isn't this the same guy that used to sit and beg? Is this the same? Something. He sees. He's not blind anymore. Is this the same guy? So they're not sure. Some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. You know, they say everyone in the world has a twin somewhere. I know where mine is. You don't? But, you know, what do they call it? Doppelganger, which is a really funny word. Doppelganger, someone who looks like you. Somewhere in the world, you ever have someone come up to you and go, hey, I guess someone you could be a twin sister, a twin brother. You look just like him. I thought you were them. They're having this argument. The neighbors who see this guy are like, is that him? No, that's just some guy who looks like him. And they're not sure. And so the neighbors are discussing it. But the man himself insisted, I am the man. I'm the man. I'm the one that was blind. And they're like, how is it then that you see? Tell me why your life is different. Tell me what's changed. Something's different. You're claiming that you're the same guy, that you're not an imposter. Tell me what's happened. What happened? The neighbors want to know. They've seen the change. He replied, the man they call Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me, go and wash. I went and washed, and I could see. Where is the man, they asked him. I don't know, he said. You know, he doesn't know where Jesus went. He had mud on his eyes, he was blind, and Jesus did that and went off somewhere. He never saw Jesus. He experienced something, and he couldn't explain it. And so, Jesus, this guy had never seen Jesus, but he had an encounter with Jesus. And something's happened. So when they ask him, here's what he says about Jesus. The man, Jesus. The man, Jesus, did this. At first he says the man. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. So they take this blind guy and they take him to the religious leaders. And they get all upset. They get all upset because Jesus made mud on the Sabbath and he healed this guy on the Sabbath. They had this view that on church day, you're only supposed to honor God and you're not supposed to do any work because you're supposed to rest. And Jesus made mud. If he's not keeping the rules, if he's not keeping the Sabbath, then he's a sinner. Therefore, the Pharisees asked him how he received his sight. He tells them he put mud, and I washed, and now I see. The Pharisees said, this man's not from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. Then they got So they were divided. There's confusion about Jesus. Some believe and some don't. And we can argue about many things. Some accept Jesus as the Savior of the world, as God in the flesh. He came to save and be the way and truth and the life for us to go to heaven and have a relationship with God and be forgiven for our sins. Some accept that by faith and put their trust in it. And some aren't so sure that Jesus wasn't just another man, just a good man. And there can be disagreement. Here they disagree. They turn back to the blind man. What do you say about him? Since it was your eyes that were open. What do you say? The man changes. Remember he said, Jesus, the man, put mud on my eyes? We can see his faith is growing, and now he says, he's a prophet. It means he's a messenger from God. He's a representative of God. God's working his truth through him. His faith has grown. He's encountered Jesus. He's experienced something. He can't explain it. He doesn't understand it, but he knows something's happened. Some truth has come in. His life has been changed. It's changing. And his faith is growing. And he says he's a prophet. He's not just a man. Now he's a representative of God. And there's a connection to God he has. You can see this man's faith growing as we read through the story. They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight. So they sent for the man's parents. Dun dun dun. Busted? Right? They think he's lying. That he's been pulling a scam all these years, that he wasn't really blind. That he was just out there trying to beg and get money and live off everyone else. They don't believe him. So they're going to try to prove that this guy's story is all phony. They're going to try to tear down what Jesus has done and prove it to be false. So they sent for the man's parents. They're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to end this way today. And we'll dig in more and go through the rest of the story next week. But I'm going to end this way. Here's what I want you to get today. Here's your take home. If you're taking notes, this is the one thing I want you to write down. To gain sight, obey Jesus. Seek what's right and see the light. To gain sight, obey Jesus. This guy had to listen to Jesus say, go and wash. And he had to obey Jesus. If he hadn't obeyed Jesus, he would not have been healed. Jesus has given his instructions, his commands, his revelation has been given. And this man heeds the revelation. He listens to the revelation and he obeys Jesus. So if you find yourself with spiritual vision that's obscure, that you don't really have spiritual light in your life, I want you to seek Jesus. I want you to obey Jesus. Just listen to Jesus and start to follow what Jesus says. As you go and you seek what's right, you will start to see the light. You see this man grow in his faith as he obeyed Jesus the man. And he obeys him. And God works and starts to work. And he starts to grow in his faith. And now he sees Jesus as more than just a man. And his journey continues next week. To gain sight, obey Jesus. Seek what's right and see the light.